character that Eddie Taylor Park pulled.
So Tommy Trailer Park Southern deleted the program.
I would like to change my character.
And then you touch my inner spirit animal.
Are you ready?
What's turned away from you?
I actually have no idea. I don't know, I have no idea. It feels offensive, but I don't know.
The paper said, so.
Oh, it's already recorded.
And I was determined to make it. Oh, wow.
Alex, it's characters like these that make unrealistic situations for people like you know?
Oh, Evan, we can do it! We can do it!
Oh my god, like if we have a baby, then like the Hoy, like Maneto's baby.
Oh, I can't ready to send it.
Can I be the mother?
Where's Carlos?
Oh, man.
Carlos is laying down.
Yeah.
Is he actually?
What's the demotion?
I love him. What is he?
Really?
Yeah, it was much as got,
Tummy down, computer in front of himself. Behind like
He's like in the airplane in the air behind him, like kicking like a little girl, like.
You're lacking in people.
Where Lily was from, I know, we had to walk around.
Is everyone here for the state?
Yes, Your Honor.
Everyone here for the defense? Does the defense have any witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Corey Isaacs.
Alright, Mr. Hyde, when you stand on the left, remember you have been sworn.
Your Honor, I'd like to note for the record that we have no cross, but I will be doing objections as necessary just for practice purposes.
Understood? Is the camera recording?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Bartel, you can proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name's Corey Hyde.
And where are you from, Mr. Hyde?
You know, from there, here, everywhere, nowhere, it doesn't really matter.
What do you do for a living?
I'm the executive assistant of the Black Bear. You know, I do executive things.
How did you get into this line of work?
You see, for a while, I did odd jobs for a while, trying to be a gambler with my pops, but those odd jobs get kind of tiring, so I asked my Uncle Giovanni to set me up a job, and he got me the job at the Black Bear Casino. That's how I became the executive assistant.
And who's your boss at the Black Bear Casino?
Well, my boss is Miss Avery Bancroft, but I like to say that I'm practically my own boss.
What makes you say this?
You see, Miss Bancroft, she's kind of this sweet lady, and I got my hands on everything that's going on in the casino. So I don't really think she'll be able to do her job if it wasn't for me.
So what do you actually do at the casino?
I do a little bit of everything. I set up meetings, I handle the calendar, I make phone calls, I buy things with the company credit card, you know. Again, everything in the casino has to go by me.
Now, Mr. Hyde, are you familiar with Mickey Keenan?
Mickey Keenan, yeah, I know him. I know Mr. Keenan.
How do you know Mr. Keenan?
You see, Mr. Keenan, he's 5'0", you know, he's a cop. He's an officer of the law I worked with earlier this year.
What were you working with Detective Keenan on?
Well, you see, he contacted me around the time the Gambling Commission announced that they would be issuing a new casino license. He called me saying that he was an auditor from the commission and that we were being considered for a license. So naturally, I was eager to meet the guy, you know.
Could you tell us more about this license process?
Sure. See, the Gambling Commission, they regulate a bunch of things having to do with gambling. One of those is who gets a new casino license. And we were being considered, well, I guess you could say we were very excited to expand the business.
So what happened after you met with Mickey Keenan about this license?
You see, this is when things got weird. I met with Keenan, and then that's when he revealed to me that he was a cop. He was some sort of vigilante, and that he wanted me to work as an informant.
Objection, Your Honor, more prejudice than probative. That's the term vigilante.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, could you tell us what happened during this meeting?
He just told me that he was a cop, some sort of officer, and that he wanted me to work as an informant in catching Miss Bancroft bribing Chase Covington.
Well, let's take a step back. Who's Chase Covington?
Chase Covington is the chair for the Midlands Gambling Commission, so naturally we're excited to meet with him.
And what would your role be in as an informant for Detective Keenan?
I mean, I just had to settle meetings, you know, between myself, Vigilante Keenan, Miss Bancroft, and Mr. Covington. And, you know, since I already did that as my job, I could do this like this, you know, it was a piece of cake.
Well, when was the first meeting that you set up?
The first one I set up was on March 31st of this year. I was there, Copper was there, and Miss Bancroft was there.
What was discussed during this meeting?
This meeting, we talked about business, conservation is this, fresh food is that. None of the good stuff that I like to talk about, but eventually things kind of changed.
How did they change?
You see, Detective Keenan, he started talking about a bribe.
And how did Miss Bancroft react when Detective Keenan started talking about this bribe?
See, Miss Bancroft was really uncomfortable. You know, she's this like, sweet little lady, and she kind of likes the backbone to do the things that are necessary every once in a while. That's my job. That's why I'm there to give her the push she needs.
And what happened after this March 31st meeting?
Well, things got kind of quiet for a while, at least for a couple of weeks, no meetings or nothing. And then I started doubting this whole scheme with Detective Keenan.
So did you just stop working with Detective Keenan then?
Well, no, you see, even though I had done nothing wrong, he told me that he could throw me in jail. And trust me, you won't believe how many of my cousins have been thrown in jail for stuff they haven't done. So I just agreed to keep going with him. But this time I was just going to do what he asked, no more, no less.
So what was your next assignment?
It was the same thing, just setting up meetings, set up for one on April 13th, set up another for April 16th. But that one didn't go quite as planned.
Why did the April 16th meeting not go quite as planned?
Well, you see, we had all agreed that we would show up at this meeting. And by all, I mean myself, the police officer Keenan, Miss Bancroft, and Mr. Covington. Mr. Covington, though, he didn't show up.
So did you all just wait for Mr. Covington then?
I mean, I did, and Miss Bancroft did. We waited roughly like 30 minutes. The man still hadn't shown up. It was at this point that the detective went into the bathroom to cool off. I mean, like the whole situation got tense. And it reminded me of one of my family dinners. But when he came back, Miss Bancroft, she was gone.
And what did Detective Keenan do once he came back?
I mean, what didn't he do? He came outside. He got upset, started yelling, raising his voice, face got red like a tomato, and then he left. You know, yelling some things that made me wonder if he kisses his mama with that mouth.
No further questions, Your Honor.
There is no cross-examination. Mr. Hyde, you are excused.
Your Honor, the state is too afraid to cross this witness. I've been paid off by the mob, and no one should be able to cross.
However, there being no cross, you're excused, Mr. Hyde. You have the mother. Does the defense have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Avery Bancroft.
All right. Ms. Bancroft, the witness stands to my right, to my left, your right.
Yes, sir.
You can proceed if you want, Mr. Bell.
Good evening. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Avery Bancroft.
Where do you live, Miss Bancroft?
Well, I've lived in Midlands my whole life, the same little house on 5th Street. I'm sure you passed it a billion times. When I'm not at home, I spend most of my time at the Black Bear Casino.
What do you do at the Black Bear Casino?
I'm the owner. I inherited it from my father a few years back, but I started working there when I was 18. I worked as a front desk clerk and then moved into management over housekeeping. Now I just supervise, make sure everything runs smoothly, which may seem like an easy job, but I have the gray hair to prove that it can be really stressful.
Is the Black Bear the only casino that you own?
Yes, it is.
Have you ever thought about expanding or opening up a new casino?
Of course. It's always been my dream to open up casinos all over Midlands. make my father so proud to see our little family business grow into something so much more. I actually submitted a proposal for a new casino earlier this year.
Who did you submit this proposal to?
The Midlands Gambling Commission. At the time, they're accepting proposals for a new casino, which doesn't happen very often.
Did you talk to anyone specifically about your proposal?
Yes, I talked to Chase Covington and Mickey Keenan about my proposal.
I know you mentioned Chase Covington and Mickey Keenan. Who is Chase Covington?
Chase Covington is the chair for the Midlands Gambling Commission.
And who is Mickey Keenan?
But when I was first introduced to Mickey Keenan, I thought that he was an auditor for the commission.
First introduced? Miss Bancroft, how did you two meet?
He wanted to talk to me about my proposal, so my assistant Corey set up a meeting.
When was this meeting scheduled for?
It was scheduled to take place March 31st.
How did you find out about this meeting?
Corey emailed me the details, when it would take place and where.
Did you give Corey Hyde any information about your proposal?
No, I didn't. But he suggested I talk about how my casino would help the Midlands economy, so I needed to figure out whatever I needed to do to make my proposal go through.
Did you know how to make your proposal go through?
Of course. The Black Bear is a very successful casino. I know what it takes to make a business thrive. I charmed Mr. Covington with the facts. My casino was going to have 14 gaming tables, several slot machines, and employ 250 people. But the best part is that I donate $1.7 million to charities every year.
Was Chase Covington the only person you had to talk to about your proposal?
No, there are 3 chairs for the Midlands Gambling Commission, but everyone knows that Chase is the swing vote, making him the deciding factor in most cases. No, there are 3 chairs.
Ms. Bancroft, could you please walk us through the March 31st meeting?
Sure. Myself, Corey, and Mickey Keenan all met at one of the hotel rooms in the Black Bear. Started talking about my proposal, square footage, and maybe adding a wedding venue. And then Mickey Keenan interrupted and asked what else I had to offer. He said that having a good business proposal wasn't enough. I started to feel really uneasy about the whole thing.
Why did you begin to feel uneasy?
Well, then Corey asked me if I'd be willing to do anything to sweeten the pot. Mickey Keenan said I had to go the extra mile to make everybody happy. I thought my casino was enough, but they disagreed.
Did Mickey Keenan have any other instructions about your proposal?
Yes, he did. He said that I definitely needed to make Chase Covington happy, and I had to pitch more than ideas.
Did you have any way to get in touch with Chase Covington after this meeting?
Yes. Mickey Keenan is familiar with everyone at the commission, so Corey set up a meeting.
Could you please walk us through this meeting that you had with Chase Covington?
Yes, again it took place at the Black Bear Hotel, except this time Chase Covington came along. It started off the same way as the last meeting. I started to talk about my proposal, square footage, but then Mickey Keenan said that I needed to do something to make my proposal more appealing.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay?
As to Mickey Keenan's statement?
Yes.
Response?
Your Honor, this doesn't go to prove the truth of the matter asserted, but rather the effect on the listener, being Ms. Bancroft.
What is the effect, if you could proffer?
If I may proffer, Ms. Bancroft will go on to testify that this induced her to commit bribery and then tailor her proposal just for Chase Covington.
Any response?
To this point, Your Honor, we've heard no foundation laid that any such effect exists. And opposing counsel wishes to bring out this information as effect on the listener. We see that effect before the hearsay comes onto the record.
Response?
Your Honor, through Ms. Bancroft's previous testimony, she's elicited statements from both Corey Hyde and Detective Keenan. In court today, we've heard that Detective Keenan is a government agent, and Corey Hyde was acting as his government agent's informant. These statements that were elicited from both parties show the inducement that was applied to Ms. Bancroft throughout this investigation, which can go to lay foundation for her statement right now being an effect that was put onto her from Detective Keenan.
I tend to agree with Mr. Bell. On top of this, if the effect is going forward and committing the bribe, even if specifically it's in a certain manner, obviously both sides have admitted to that fact. And furthermore, don't we have a good faith basis to believe that, let me ask you this, Ms. Elwa, do you have a good faith basis to believe that the witness does not have such an effect, given whatever materials you have from the witness prior?
Your Honor, that's exactly the point. The prosecution is here contending that these few statements made by Officer Keenan or Corey Hyde isn't enough to make this woman commit a felony. That's exactly the point, Your Honor. It's the prosecution's contention that this effect on the listener does not exist. If we stipulate the fact that the effect on the listener does exist, then there wouldn't be a case here today.
So just because this particular statement does not in one full sweep prove that Ms. Bancroft was induced, I don't quite believe that it should be excluded. So I'll allow them a little bit of leeway. Mr. Bell did lay all the foundation that has preceded the statement, so the objection's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Bancroft, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes.
Could you please walk us through the meeting you had with Chase Covington after your March 31st meeting?
We met at the Blackbird Hotel in room 312. This took place on April 13th. I started talking about my proposal, like I said, and then Mickey Keenan said that I needed to do something to make my proposal more appealing to Chase Covington.
Ms. Bancroft, did you know what Mickey Keenan meant whenever he said more appealing?
He was talking about a bribe. I'm sure.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Response.
Your Honor, I'm not asking Ms. Bancroft to delve into the mindset of Detective Keenan. Instead, I'm asking her to draw a rationally based perception that she can due to previously elicited statements, the context of the statements, and the feelings that she had, the uneasiness, the uncomfortableness that she had throughout these entire meetings. Due to these facts, she can draw a rationally based perception from all these surrounding effects.
The argument's good, but I do think ultimately, given the wording of the question, you are asking her for Mickey Keenan's opinions, not about her opinions. I'm going to sustain the objection, rephrase your question to limit it to Ms. Bancroft's perceptions of Mickey Keenan's opinions, or what she felt Mr. Keenan was insinuating.
Yes, Your Honor.
Move to strike, Your Honor.
Yes, sure, granted.
Ms. Bancroft, I know that Detective Keenan elicited a statement earlier in this meeting. Did this statement influence you to bribe Chase Covington?
Yes, all of his statements and Corey Hyde's statement made me feel like it was the only option was to bribe Chase Covington. If he never would have said these things to me and made me his puppet, I never would have bribed Chase Covington.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Understood. Is there a cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Ms. Bancroft, you've been here all throughout trial today.
Yes.
You've been sitting right there in that defendant's chair.
Yes, I've been here throughout the entire trial.
That means that you could see and hear the witnesses as they were testifying.
Yes, I did hear everybody.
So you heard when Mr. Menethos took the stand.
Yes, Mr. Menethos is Chase Covington's brother.
And you were there for that meeting with Mr. Menethos' witness between you and Chase Covington.
I was there. I wanted to talk to Chase Covington about my proposal, get things going. I was really excited about opening a new casino.
Now, this meeting, it didn't take place at your office?
No, it didn't take place at my office. It took place at Chase Covington's house. He said that because we weren't like really close to the proposal being submitted, that it should be really less formal.
So that meeting didn't happen in Chase Covington's office then?
No, I said that it happened at his house.
At 11 o'clock at night?
No, not 11 o'clock. Actually, I think it was a little bit earlier than that.
Mr. Menethos was lying when he said 11 o'clock at night?
No, I don't think Mr. Menethos was lying. But as you heard, he does like to drink, so I don't think he can tell you what time anything happened that night.
So, meeting at Chase Covington's house. Over alcoholic drinks.
Yes, I'm not a big drinker, but I did take a little of something just to be courteous.
Now, this meeting that took place at Chase Covington's house during the nighttime over alcoholic drinks, that happened Thanksgiving 2014.
Yes, it happened right after the proposal was announced. I was really excited. I wanted to talk to Chase Covington and sell him on my ideas.
You didn't meet Mickey Keenan until March of 2015.
No, I did not, and I wish I would have never met Mickey Keenan.
So at this point, you didn't even know what Mickey Keenan looked like.
No, I had no knowledge of who Mickey Keenan was at all.
And you heard Corey Hyde take the stand today?
Yes, I did.
So you know then that she wasn't acting as Officer Keenan's informant when you were meeting with Chase Covington in November of 2014.
No, my assistant Corey wasn't there. No.
And she wasn't acting as Officer Keenan's informant at that time?
No.
Now, I want to talk to you about another meeting that Officer Keenan was not present for. That was a meeting that you had with your head of security, Danny Hoy.
Yes, I did have a meeting with my head of security, Miss Boyd. I think it was April 12th. I was trying to bring her back into the loop because she had been feeling really left out since I've been focusing on my proposal.
Actually, the meeting I'm talking about took place in Miss Hoy's office.
Yeah, she's the head of security. That's where it took place.
And you went to Miss Hoy's office to talk to her about blind spots in your VIP room.
Yes, I was aware that there were a couple of blind spots in our casino, and I want to make sure that didn't happen for the new casino if we got it.
Well, actually, Miss Hoy offered to fix the blind spots.
She did, but it would have taken a couple weeks to do it, so I wanted to focus on my proposal, and that was it.
So you told her not to?
Not at this time.
Okay. So that means that you left the blind spots open in the VIP room.
Yes, but we do have 30 security employees working there. They walk around the entire casino to make sure nobody's doing anything funny.
This was in the VIP room in your hotel?
In the casino, yes.
The same VIP room in your casino where you were later spotted playing blackjack, Chase Covington.
Yeah, we played blackjack on that day.
And on that day when you played blackjack, you each had your own briefcase.
Objection. Substantially more prejudicial than probative.
Explain?
Your Honor, neither side in today's court is contesting the fact that Ms. Bancroft gave a bribe to Mr. Covington. By Ms. Elwha proffering these statements from Ms. Bancroft, it's going to the jury's ears and hearing signs of bribery and therefore painting Ms. Bancroft in a negative light, showing signs about the VIP room, blind spots, and briefcases that if Ms. Elwha is going to proffer from Ms. Bancroft may or may not have contained cash for this exchange of briefcases. That is substantially more prejudicial than probative.
Response?
Your Honor, this has an incredibly high probative value, as one of the things that the prosecution is arguing in today's case is predisposition. An element of predisposition is whether or not the defendant participated in the crime. It's going to show her level of participation, her premeditation. She found blind spots, Your Honor, left those blind spots there on purpose, and later went on to commit a bribe in the VIP room. Any prejudicial effect that this could have is substantially outweighed by showing her predisposition, therefore adding probative value.
The objection was well made but overruled. Ultimately, I don't think 403 requires them to censor their witness, to censor their case, and I'm persuaded by the elements of bribery, including level of participation.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, this is the same VIP room where you later sat down with Chase Covington to play blackjack.
Yes, it is. We were actually supposed to have a meeting earlier that day, but Mr. Covington was really late.
Now, when you're playing blackjack with Chase Covington in the VIP room, you were in a blind spot.
Yeah, I was a blind spot, but Allie Thomas, the dealer, was right there, and he saw everything.
Now, you each had a briefcase with you.
Yes, like I said, we were supposed to have a meeting earlier, but Mr. Covington was late, so I just went and played a hand of blackjack.
Now, this briefcase, this is the same briefcase that Corey Hyde saw you with.
Yes, it is.
The same briefcase that you put $200,000 into.
Yes, Corey actually helped me put the money into the briefcase when we were in my office.
Now, when you're putting money into your briefcase, $200,000 worth of money, Officer Keenan wasn't there.
No, they weren't there, but Corey Hyde was there, and it was $250,000.
They said $250,000. Officer Keenan wasn't there when you're putting $250,000 into a briefcase.
Now, he wasn't there when I was putting money into the briefcase, but he was there for the bribe, which took place later that night.
You're telling us the bribe didn't take place in your casino?
No, it did not.
So are you telling this jury that you weren't seen in your VIP room sitting there with Chase, with a briefcase that had $250,000 in it?
I was seen there, but like I said, the bribe didn't take place in the VIP room. It took place later that day in private with Mickey Keenan and my assistant Corey. Chase Covington wasn't going to accept a bribe in the middle of the day with a bunch of employees around.
Oh, so Corey Hyde was there when this bribe was exchanged?
Yes, Corey.
So surely your attorneys asked him about that direct to confirm your story.
I didn't hear anything about it.
So you're the first one who's saying that today here in court?
Yes, but I don't think Corey would admit it to it anyway. He got a payoff from Chase Covington. She paid Corey Hyde $15,000 and Mickey Keenan $35,000 to keep their mouths shut.
So surely you have an email to show us setting up this meeting?
No, I don't.
Maybe a text message?
No, but like I said, Mickey Keenan and Chase Covington are very careful.
A phone call, even?
And one wasn't brought. Maybe you have a phone call that you'd like to bring up?
So you have no evidence other than your testimony to this jury to say that this bribe happened, not in your VIP room, but in some undisclosed location.
Yes, it did happen then.
But all we have to say for that is your word.
Yes, and I'm telling the truth. I went to the police to tell my side of the story and tell them that Mickey Keenan and Corey Hyde influenced me in doing this. I wouldn't have gone to the police, but I didn't want the truth to come out.
But Corey Hyde didn't testify to that day here in court.
No, he was paid off.
You're the only one who did.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Bancroft. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Hollowell. Is there a redirect examination for witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Ms. Bancroft, I know Ms. Elwalt talked to you a little bit about the meetings you had at Chase Covington's home where Tracy Netsch was present. Do you remember this conversation?
Yes, I do.
At this point, where you were at Chase Covington's house, were you thinking about bribing Chase Covington?
No, I wasn't. I was just focused on my proposal, wedding venue, square footage, that kind of thing.
And later on, whenever you were stuffing $250,000 into a briefcase, you said that Mickey Keenan wasn't there.
No.
Objection on a reading?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Yes, Your Honor. Mickey Keenan wasn't, Ms. Bancroft, was Mickey Keenan in your office when you were stuffing $250,000 into your briefcase?
No, he wasn't, but Corey was.
And was anything influencing you to put this money into a briefcase?
Yes. Corey bought the briefcase for me and made it very clear that was the only way I was going to get a second casino.
Did you hear anything, any statements that would have influenced you to put this money in this briefcase?
Yes. Corey said that I needed to sweeten the pot, and Mickey Keenan said I had to pitch more than ideas.
And you were being influenced by these statements rather than someone being in the room with you?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Is there a recross based on that?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you for your time, Ms. Bancroft. You're excused. Does the defense have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Danny Hoyt to the stand.
All right. Ms. Hoyt, witness stands here to my left. Mr. Bartella, you can proceed in your room.
Yes, Your Honor. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hi, my name is Danny Hoyt.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Hoyt?
I work private security. I'm currently the head of security at the Black Bear Casino, where I've been for the past 3 years.
How did you get into this line of work?
I grew up doing martial arts with my dad, and I wanted to go into MMA fighting and be kind of Midland's own Ronda Rousey, but was a little too short for UFC, and instead went into private security.
So what do you actually do as head of security?
I'm the eyes and the ears of the casino. I have 30 employees underneath me, and we watch out for any cheaters or security threats to the casino, and I do a little bit more than just that.
What else is there to do?
Well, I have to protect the casino's name from the press, and I also have to watch out for Ms. Bancroft, the casino owner.
So how do you look after the casino's name from the press?
Well, I have to make sure that all of our high-level politicians and celebrities who come to the Black Bear are safe from the press inside of the Black Bear. And on the other side of that, I also have to make sure that these celebrities and politicians don't make a bad name for our casino.
And how do you look after the casino's owner, Ms. Bancroft?
I track her movements throughout the casino, following her on the monitors.
Now, Ms. Hoyt, I'd like to talk more specifically about this case. Are you familiar with Corey Hyde?
Yes, I am. Corey and I work together at the Black Bear. She's a really sweet person. We don't really get along, but she is nice. She kind of gets under her foot.
How does she get in your way?
My job is to protect Miss Bancroft, and Corey just gets in my way of that. She really likes to stand between me and Mrs. Bancroft.
Has Corey Hyde always gotten in your way ever since Corey Hyde started working?
Yes, here and there, but it felt really specifically like Corey was getting in my way a lot when Chase Covington was frequenting our casino a little bit too much for my liking.
Why were you concerned about Chase Covington frequenting the casino?
Well, Chase is the chair of the Midlands Gambling Commission, which makes him a pretty high-level politician. Mr. Covington being at our casino too much just kind of looks bad. It could be bad rumors, or it would make us look bad in the press, basically.
So what did Corey Hyde do when you brought your concerns to him?
Well, I tried to tell Corey about this and how it worried me. Maybe we should talk to Ms. Bancroft together, and instead Corey told me to stick to being a glorified watchdog. I don't even think Corey expressed my concerns to Ms. Bancroft at all.
Now, I'd like to talk about March 31st. Do you remember that day?
Yes, I do. I was supposed to go over my end-of-month security report with Ms. Bancroft, but I couldn't find her in the casino.
What did you do when you couldn't find her?
Well, I began to look for Corey. I searched the security monitors for them and scoped the blind spots in person, but I didn't find either of them until the very end of the day.
Where did you find them?
They were together exiting the hotel area.
And what did you do after you spotted them exiting the hotel area?
Well, I went to talk to them. I rescheduled my security report with Ms. Bancroft to take place the following day, and I tried to ask Corey where they had been. Corey just dismissed me again.
So Corey just dismissed you. Did you ever bring this up to Ms. Bancroft?
I did. During our security reports that I had with her the next day, I kind of hinted at her being missing the previous day and how that worried me. On her head of security, I like to know where she is at all times. Ms. Bancroft took my concerns very positively, agreed to keep me back in the loop about her meetings, which was good, so I was back in with her.
To be clear, was Corey Hyde in this meeting where you became back in the loop?
No, this was one of the only times in that time period where I got to speak to Ms. Bancroft without Corey Hyde there.
Well, now that you were back in the loop, Ms. Hoy, were you informed about any other future meetings?
I was. I received an email from Ms. Bancroft on April 12th asking me to come in to her office and talk to her about security for a meeting that would take place the following day. So I went to her office immediately.
And what happened when you went to her office?
Well, I was there to make some suggestions about how we could increase security for this meeting, and Corey Hyde was also there, and she just interrupted me every chance she got.
How many times did Corey Hyde interrupt you?
Well, she interrupted me twice successfully, and she did try for a third.
So, could you tell us when the first time Corey Hyde interrupted you?
I was suggesting that the meeting take place in maybe a more private location or just an easier location for us all to get to, like Ms. Bancroft's office where most of her meetings take place. But before I could even finish my sentence, Corey interrupted me and was very insistent that the meeting take place in a hotel suite 312.
And where did this meeting take place?
In suite 312.
Could you tell us the second time that you were interrupted by Corey Hyde?
Well, this time I was attempting to suggest that I take place in this meeting, actually be present, sit next to Mrs. Bancroft to better protect her from anything that could happen to her. And before I could finish this sentence, Corey Hyde again interrupted me, and she was insistent that I not take part in this meeting.
And where were you standing during this meeting?
I was asked to stand outside of the hotel room.
Now, you previously stated that you were almost interrupted a third time. When did this happen?
Well, this time I was able to finish my suggestion. I wanted to do weapons pat-downs and confiscate these cell phones before anybody went into this meeting to keep the privacy very high. And Ms. Bancroft really liked this idea and agreed with me.
And were there any other security precautions for this meeting?
There was. I did an extremely thorough 2-hour-long sweep of room 312 before anybody went into this meeting. I checked for security taps, any hidden cameras, any kind of device that would infiltrate the privacy of this meeting.
Your Honor, no further questions.
Does the state have any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
Good evening, Ms. Hoy. You're currently employed at the Black Bear Casino and Hotel.
Yes, I am.
As you stated on direct, as head of security.
Yes, I've been the head for the past 3 years. Trust me, I worked my way up to being the head, and I've done private security for a long time. I'm very good at what I do.
And you're here today with us testifying for the defense?
Yes, I am.
Specifically in that of your boss, Avery Bancroft.
Yes, I'm testifying on behalf of Ms. Bancroft.
And as head of security at the Black Bear, you presumably received a form of monetary compensation from this institution?
Yes, I'm paid very well for my time, and I work very hard for every dollar I earn.
And this extensive payment comes from none other than your boss, Ms. Avery Bancroft?
Yes, my boss does pay me, as everybody's boss pays them.
Now, Ms. Foy, I'd like to talk about an email you received on April 12th about running security for an April 13th meeting. Would you recognize a copy of this email if I were to show it to you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, please let the record reflect that I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 20. Permission to approach the witness with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 20.
You may.
Thank you.
Ms. Foy, is this the email that Avery Bancroft sent you on April 12th?
Yes, it is.
And does it appear to be in the same or substantially similar condition that it was when you once received it?
It looks exactly how it was when I received it.
Your Honor, permission to move what's been pre-marked as Exhibit 20 into evidence as the State's speed.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
It shall be moved in as State speed.
Now, Ms. Foy, you received this email about running security for a meeting on April 13th.
Yes, I did.
And in this email, your boss, Avery Bancroft, tells you that you're going to be meeting with representatives from the Midlands Gambling Commission.
Yes, that's exactly what it says.
And Ms. Bancroft told you that discretion is going to be of the utmost importance.
Exactly, which is why she wanted to talk to me so that we could go over security measures for this meeting.
That it is essential that what was going to be spoken about was not caught on tape or recorded in any way.
Exactly. Mrs. Bancroft was putting in a proposal for a new casino license, and Ms. Bancroft has some really wonderful ideas for this casino license. She didn't want anybody to steal these ideas, so every time she met with somebody regarding this, she wanted it to be extra tight, very private.
And just to be clear, Ms. Bancroft didn't want anybody other than the representatives from the Midlands Gambling Commission to hear these ideas at this meeting.
Exactly.
So much to the extent that she made sure that none of these representatives had access to their cell phones or any access to any device that could potentially record any conversation.
Right. Ms. Bancroft didn't want these conversations recorded. I also think she didn't want cell phones. Part of why I suggested no cell phones be in this meeting was because cell phones are a really big distraction. And if somebody's on their phone, they're not fully listening to Mrs. Bancroft's ideas.
And Ms. Foy, you encouraged pat-downs for this meeting on April 13th?
Absolutely. I didn't want anybody to come in with any kind of a weapon that could potentially harm Ms. Bancroft, especially since Corey Hyde wouldn't let me be in the meeting.
And as stated on direct, Corey Hyde was not about these pat-downs. However, your boss liked this idea, so he approved those? Or she approved those?
Yes, she approved this idea.
Now, Ms. Foy, I'd like to talk about April 16, 2015. You were working that day?
I was.
And you were standing, or you were in your office, and around 1 p.m. you were looking at the VIP room footage?
Yes, I was observing the security monitors in my office most of the day, and around 1 p.m. I watched my boss, Ms. Bancroft, walk into the VIP room.
And Ms. Bancroft was carrying a briefcase?
She was. She sat down at the blackjack table in the center.
That center table by the fountain?
Yes, the center table is in front of the fountain.
And that's when you lost sight of your boss, Avery Bancroft?
Yes, this table is one of our blind spots in the casino.
And about 1 hour passes until Mr. Covington walks in carrying a similar looking
Objection,
briefcase.
Your Honor. This is wasting the time of the court.
Why is that?
Because this is irrelevant testimony that is neither here nor there.
Response on relevance, Mr. Hefner?
Your Honor, this is highly relevant. Our relevance is really low, and Ms. Foy's testimony here today will highlight as to how Ms. Bancroft came to find out about this blind spot.
Response, Your Honor?
You may.
The testimony that is coming out is that this witness saw Ms. Bancroft go into this blind spot and saw Mr. Covington also go into this blind spot. We have already admitted to this bribe taking place and it not occurring in this blind spot. Therefore, this testimony is just irrelevant.
I understand that it's your contention as the defense that the bribe did not occur in this blind spot, but that does seem to be the prosecution's contention. And if they're alleging that the bribe took place while within the blind spot, I do believe that this would go to show predisposition given the preceding testimony, so the objections are...
Yes, Your Honor. And Ms. Foy, I'll repeat the question. Around an hour passed, and it's around 2 p.m. at this point when you witnessed Mr. Covington walk in carrying a similar looking briefcase?
Yes, Mr. Covington walked in about an hour after Ms. Bancroft did, and also took a seat at the blackjack table in the middle, the one that's unfortunately in our blind spot.
And at this table, you saw Allie Thomas, the dealer, Avery Bancroft, Mr. Covington.
Well, I mean, I couldn't see them, but I know that Allie Thomas was the dealer on that day in the that blackjack table, and I could tell that the two of them sat at that table.
Now, Ms. Foy, I'd like to talk about how the defendant came to find out about this blind spot. You were working on April 15, 2015?
I was. Actually, this was the first day that Ms. Bancroft had come into my office, which was very jarring. I had donuts on my desk. I had to roundhouse kick them off there before she saw me eating into carbs. And Ms. Bancroft came in to talk about general security first, and then she decided that when I told her about the blind spots, we really honed in on talking about the blind spots.
And this was the first time that Ms. Bancroft came to visit you in your office?
Yes, again, like I said, it was very jarring.
Since you began working at the Black Bear Casino and Hotel?
Yes.
And when Ms. Bancroft came in asking about these security measures, she asked you about these blind spots?
She did, and I mean, these blind spots are a result of a renovation we did in early 2014, which is actually when we put the fountain in. The fountain's just really pretty, it plays music, it's very soothing. But the bad side about the fountain is that we had to take out one of the security cameras, and we never fixed the cameras in that room to adjust to the blind spot.
And as you said, these security or these renovations for that fountain where the camera was taken out and thus causing this blind spot was in 2014?
Yes.
And this time when Ms. Bancroft came into your office inquiring about this blind spot was April 15, 2015?
Yes.
So nearly a year later.
Yes.
And you offered to fix this blind spot upon telling your boss?
Yes, I did. I offered to fix the blind spot. I've also been petitioning for us to get about 50 more security personnel on the floor, and Ms. Bancroft told me that it wasn't an issue. Given that we have dealers at all of the tables, she said the blind spots really weren't that big of a deal because it's not a true blind spot and that we do have somebody observing what's going on the floor.
For the record, Ms. Hoy, Avery Bancroft told you not to fix that blind spot.
She told me not to worry about it. It wasn't a big issue.
And you even offered to put additional physical staff members to cover that blind spot.
I did. Again, Ms. Bancroft told me that we have people who walk throughout the casino and the VIP room every day, and given the dealers that adding more personnel in her mind was not needed.
And when Ms. Bancroft came into your office inquiring about this blind spot, Mickey Keenan wasn't with her?
No, it was just Mrs. Bancroft and myself in my office.
And Corey Hyde wasn't with her?
It was just Mrs. Bancroft and myself. There was nobody else in my office.
Just wanted to make that clear. Now, Ms. Hoy, you stated on direct that you have monthly meetings with your boss about security measures?
Yes, at the last day of the month, I like to go over everything that's happened in the casino with Ms. Bancroft. Anything from somebody stealing chips to if we get to escort somebody out for being too drunk.
And in the past, you had told her about this blind spot.
I've attempted to bring it up, but because we haven't had any security issues actually directly relating to the blind spot, it hasn't been an issue.
So because nothing had happened, that was suffice to say that this blind spot did not need to be fixed.
Well, given that nothing negative resulted from having this blind spot, Ms. Bancroft didn't think it needed to be fixed, no.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Captain. Is there a re-representation for the witness?
No, Your Honor, but we asked to set up a chart for the next witness.
You may. Thank you for your time, Ms. Hoyer.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I would suggest focusing the camera setting up.
It's a little awkward. Maybe, yeah, in that zone right there.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor.
Does the defense have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, defense calls J.D. Lawrence.
All right, Ms. Lorraine, you'll stand to my left. Remember, you have the
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, the witness is directly behind the demonstrative.
Maybe put that down until it's time for it to stand up.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. Can I proceed?
Okay.
Can you please state your name for the jury?
Hello, my name is Josephine Daphne Lorian, but I normally just go by JD.
Miss Lorian, what do you do for a living?
I'm the owner and chief auditor of Greylord Strategies, as I have been for the past 5 years. And for the previous 25 years, I worked for the FBI.
What is Greylord Strategies?
Greylord Strategies consults with state, federal, and local police departments on proper protocols.
Do you have any materials published in your field?
I do. I've published 15 articles, and 5 of them specifically deal with entrapment.
How are you involved in today's case?
I was contacted by the defense because of an audit I did of the Midland State Police Department, or MSPD, in 2014. They asked me to go over my findings and also to look at Mickey Keenan's investigation.
What data were you provided with for your investigation?
I was provided the affidavits of Corey Hyde and Mickey Keenan, as well as email correspondences.
What methods did you apply to analyze this data?
I took all of this data, looked it over, and then I compared it to the Attorney General's guidelines for undercover operations.
Do you feel you had sufficient facts and data to come to your conclusions?
Yes, I do.
Was Greylord Strategies compensated for your time and effort today?
Yes, it was. Greylord Strategies charged its standard rate in today's case.
What did your audit of the MSPD include?
It included how the MSPD handled evidence management, undercover protocols, and the training of the officers.
What did this audit discover?
This audit discovered that there were many inconsistencies when it came to the Midland State Police Department practices.
Objection, Your Honor. Character evidence.
Elaborate?
Or if I may proffer, I believe the witness is about to testify.
You may.
We believe the witness was going to testify as to an audit conducted back in 2014 about the standards of the Midland State Police Department, mistakes they made in other investigations, violations in other departments that the MSPD had, and try to link that to this case. But this, they're violating the spirit of the Rule 404, using past acts to show propensity in today's case.
Response, Mr. Robinson?
Your Honor, this is not being provided to show propensity. Rather, it's an exception under 404(d)(2, showing that since this audit was conducted a year after Mickey Keenan's investigation began, he was provided the opportunity to not have proper training in his field, therefore likely resulting in issues with his investigation.
Response on those grounds.
That's not the opportunity, they're not using this for opportunity, then they're using this for propensity. Show that he was not trained in the past and is therefore less likely to be trained in today's case. There's no need to show an opportunity to not have training. That's not what they're actually using this for, Honor.
I don't think having training is the type of thing that can have propensity. At one point you become trained, at the subsequent points the training is no longer required.
Well, Your Honor, if I may?
You may.
On that point, my objection is not to the lack of training, but the spirit of we'll say, a quality of lackadaisicalness in the MSPD department and their policies and their training.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think if the proper training procedures weren't implemented at the time that Mickey Keenan would have theoretically received training before his investigation began, that does cast some doubt as to the procedures he ended up undertaking in the course of his investigation. So the objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. What did this audit uncover?
I found not only authorization issues within the MSPD, but other issues as well, and many of these issues were still prevalent in Mickey Keenan's investigation. I actually brought along a chart to better explain these.
Your Honor, may Ms. Loon step down and make use of the chart?
Any objection from the state?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Lauren, you can step down.
Can you tell us a bit about what we're looking at here?
This is a chart of the guidelines suggested by the Attorney General's office when it comes to undercover operations, and this is just whether Mickey Keenan followed or did not follow the guideline.
So let's start from the beginning here. What sort of authorization would have been required for an investigation like Mickey Keenan?
Well, Mickey Keenan's investigation was classified as a Group 1 UCO, which means it would have needed authorization before beginning. It would have needed authorization from an upper-level officer, it would have needed authorization from the prosecution's office, and he also would have had to submit a detailed application to the prosecution's office, and he did none of these.
You mentioned issues in training with the MSPD earlier. What sort of undercover training would have been required for Mickey Keenan?
Well, further than the standard police academy training, all undercover officers need to be specialized or trained specially in undercover operations, and they also need to be trained in the read technique.
Can you explain this read technique to the jury?
The read technique is an interrogation technique used by police departments. It helps the person feeling interrogated feel less coerced or pressured, and helps that the person being interrogated doesn't give a false confession.
Did Mickey Keenan show any record of such training?
No, Mickey Keenan only attended the standard training and was not trained in the read technique.
Objection, Your Honor. Fact not in evidence.
Elaborate.
Your Honor, I don't know if Your Honor completed demonstrative, but the witness just currently marked an X in the box that says did not follow. What she had previously testified to is she found no documentation of training. That is different than Mickey Keenan not having training. By checking that box and saying he did not have training, she's testifying, or she's, I guess, marking a fact that it is not currently in evidence.
You're good, Dr. Lori. Mr. Irvinson, do you have a response?
Your Honor, the question asked was whether or not Mickey Keenan showed any accurate documentation as to this training. If Ms. Lorian's response is not adequate, I can ask her to rephrase.
So is your objection here with the nature of the visual aid or with the answer the witnesses given?
The nature of the visual aid, Your Honor, the category says specialized undercover training. Then it says that he did not follow, meaning he did not receive that. When previously the witness testified that in fact she could not find documentation. The two are not equivalent, therefore this is a fact not in evidence that she's testifying to with her pen, Your Honor.
I disagree. This argument seems to go more to the weight the jury should give this evidence rather than how admissible it should be. Ultimately, if there is a lack of evidence to support something, in fact there is evidence to its contrapositive, then we can assume for absent any contradictory evidence that it is not true. So, overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Would any further documentation be required for an investigation like Mickey Keenan's?
Yes. In addition to all the documentation you have to do to receive proper authorization to begin the undercover operation, you also must be able to document all your interactions with potential suspects or informants at every instance that you interact with them.
Did Detective Keenan document any of his interactions with Avery Bancroft?
I found no documented evidence of any of Mr. Keenan's interactions with Avery Bancroft, no.
Was any documentation provided of his interactions with Chase Covington?
I didn't find any documentation of Mr. Keenan's interactions with Chase Covington either.
Did Mickey Keenan document any of his interactions with Corey Hyde?
Once again, I found no documentation of this.
Thank you, Ms. Lori. You may be seated.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Lorian, in your investigation, did you find any evidence that Mickey Keenan followed any of the UCO guidelines?
I found very little evidence, if any at all, that Detective Keenan did anything in accordance with the UCO guidelines.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Irvinson. Is there a cross-examination for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Permission to take down the chart, Your Honor?
Sure.
Mr. Rain, I know you talked about this briefly on your direct, but I did want to go into a little more detail. You're being paid for your testimony here today.
Yes, I am.
You're being paid $20,000 for your testimony here today.
Yes, Greylark Strategies charged its standard rate.
You're the owner of Greylark Strategies, the owner and CEO.
The owner and chief auditor, as I have been for the past 5 years as Sam.
And that $20,000 was for your investigation.
Yes, it was.
And here today, to sit in that chair, you've been paid an additional $10,000.
Well, not only to sit in this chair, I was also reimbursed for my travel expenses. I don't live very close to Midland.
For your testimony here today in court, to get here to testify, $10,000.
That's correct.
Now, I want to talk to you a little more specifically about the undercover guidelines that you went into on direct. These guidelines are simply guidelines. They are not law.
Well, they are guidelines, but they're given by the U.S. Attorney General, who, his word is pretty much law.
Well, let's talk about that actually. By not following these guidelines, the MSPD didn't break any laws.
They did not break any laws. However, they adopted these policies, so they should have followed them.
Officer Keenan did not break any laws by not following these guidelines.
Not any legal laws, no.
Another issue that you talked about in your report was the idea of unconscious bias.
That's correct.
Now, unconscious bias is when experts such as yourself have subconscious thoughts that influence their findings.
I believe that is the definition of unconscious bias, yes ma'am.
Now, one of these was concerns about shortcuts that experts take.
Yes, it was. Some experts can take shortcuts when looking at data.
Now, when that happens is when they've taken previous findings and then apply new findings as a shortcut.
That is one of the times that the shortcut can happen, yes.
So when this could happen is when an expert has previously found an unfavorable finding and then applies that to a new case.
That is an instance in which it can happen, yes.
Now, you've previously done an audit of the MSPD.
I did an audit of the MSPD in 2014, yes ma'am.
And that audit was unfavorable, we'll say.
The MSPD didn't really follow the Attorney General guidelines, so if unfavorable is the word you want to use, yes.
And that was an audit that you conducted.
I did conduct that audit, yes.
And you are talking today here in court about the MSPD again, aren't you?
I am. I am testifying to the findings in that audit.
Now, the other unconscious bias you talked about was as a result of payment.
That is correct, yes. That can influence some experts.
When some experts are paid for their findings and their testimony, it can influence their decisions in cases.
It can, sometimes. However, Greylord Strategies always charges this rate, whether or not we have to testify in court.
You are being compensated for your time here in court?
I am, just like any other professional in this courtroom today.
And that was a concern for your report, is experts' findings after being paid.
Some experts see money and do whatever their side wants, but I don't do that, no ma'am.
Alright, Mr. Lee, no further questions.
Is there a redirect examination?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Alright, Ms. Moore, you can step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Are there any further witnesses for the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Alright. Are there any motions on the table?
No motions, Your Honor, just a request to set up a demonstrative before we begin our closing argument.
Any objection from the defense?
No objection, Your Honor. We simply request a brief 10-minute recess before we begin closing statements.
Any objection to that?
Your time is up.
It is 9:15.
9:23.
10 minutes aside, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll take 10. Be back here at 9:30.
Please, everybody go outside. Outside.
Anybody need help with anything? Ask Connor what he needs closing.
Okay. I'll see you tomorrow.
I know I'm a woman and that's legal. I think I can handle this one.
Well, it's my gentlemanly duty to help.
I won't mark you down for this, but, you know, you should help.
Well, you know.
Sounds like a rapid change in what you do.
What's up, Sean? Don't touch an envelope with that.
You want to know? We see
I was ready to leave. I
That's why
I wish we could. Hey, what? I wish.
was like, okay, I'm like, to give me the option to like take on one habit, and I would guess I wouldn't have a jet. So, okay.
I wish I could do. You know what? Awesome. How is it in New York?
What's up? Yeah, sure. I have issues with you. That's just a human being.
Wait, did you like recognize that Ian is wearing a full length trench coat? Take a moment. It was right.
Wow, that's so like way.
Alright.
That's awesome.
So Ian, okay, you may go. Thank you for your time, of course.
Did I get paid $20,000?
No one gets paid.
Alright, so we have a question here. So would you rather mill on D or would you rather close on
No, don't give, that's even that, like, would you rather play a traditional Keenan on A, or on F, or would you rather play high and
would you rather just close? Obviously, no.
Would you rather quit or be pushed out of the program?
You're gonna cook right now.
astronauts?
My mom sent me this
Yes, what about her?
my mom sent me a call from me on a million house. I can see it. I already saw it. It's the ugly thing for the Yeah, like actually terrible. I think that you all look it on her screen. Yeah.
It just looks like you have incredibly weird nails. Like
It's like sticking my apple.
Like, no, just like deep, like, shit got deep, like someone like pulled my nails back in the working session, and like slathered, like, feces. I don't know.
No, yeah.
So I have like specific.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's actually like next time, I'm really
We get up to like closing. The tryouts. And it's small.
Oh, yeah. That was like actually towards it.
Okay, so character. I think the threats that Hyde is threatened with are admissible, and I think they're admissible because they go to Hyde's credibility. If Hyde is under duress, it goes to show how if Hyde is credible or not. That means that 608 box needs to be checked out. 608.
Really?
So
I think that's why they're offering, but they're offering to show like Hyde's interest.
You're right. That was wrong. I let it in like because I think legally it should get in. And I wanted to hear the cross. Like, I know it's a big part of their case, and I think it does get in under 608, but that requires this big check. So that's something to know moving forward. Secondly, I think that they dropped it from the cross probably because it got a very serious statement, but Hyde crying eventually. Like to show the extent of duress.
Yeah, I never read that. H3 draft. Oh wait, no, I didn't go cry after.
I think there's a way to get this in, and I think that unwittingly they did the correct thing to get it in. You end up saying, Michaela, it doesn't really matter. You said I wasn't bothered, but then I would immediately begin to impeach you with a crime.
Yeah.
So you bait them and say, you weren't bothered by that at all. And you bait them into saying, yes, I was bothered.
Whenever he was talking about
Is it your testimony that you weren't bothered by the second time he threatens you?
Okay.
So he threatens you in the 31st meeting, the second time he threatens you, afterwards you go out and cry like he says he's actually gonna do it this time.
I was bothered, but like I said, I got myself together, realized I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. But yeah, as the person crossing Hyde, asking questions, I would ask the questions to try and bait that, such that I could go farther and use another route.
So I don't know why this building only has one Hyde cross. Like, there was a Hyde cross Irish he wrote, and I don't know how that got disseminated, but like, every single team is running the Hyde cross. And then I later changed like that, so it's not like.
That's not even good, yeah.
Because the Hyde cross we're running is not the thing that like is currently being run, but like in.
How do I incorporate Franklin too when I'm in the class? Like, I don't know how I just want to word it.
I don't know.
Maybe there's like a casino, there's a church across the street from the casino or something.
Where they cried to Jesus.
Yeah.
Going there in your life, I ain't never left you.
Wait, is that too
So
far?
what? No, I didn't fucking do it. I just erupted.
Wait, what's your opinion on, when Covington didn't show up, saying I asked Jay Copper to capture it, and he didn't have it?
Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah, I mean, well, maybe,
No,
is
no,
it
no,
good?
no.
Is it good? I don't know. I
Who
like it a
is the
lot.
incorrect person to ask if they make us run around? The answer to all of it is yes. Wait, can I ask him about the chili?
No, please not.
Yes, that's right.
Food.
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever I was talking about sweetening the pot, we actually have a potluck at the store, to which Jay costs a lot of pot chili. Now, the chili was way too spicy for everyone attending the potluck. So Keenan's suggestion, or my suggestion to sweeten the pot was to add more sugar to have more sweet spicy apples.
Can I tell you?
No, that's.
I'm being rejected, yes, I didn't even care.
It's like, this is like Hummel's defense, like making like a potluck, I have 3 witnesses, that's like
The potluck.
like, the potluck is nice.
Hi.
Hi.
We broke the closing with the thing, right?
Did you give me a 0 and write a 9? Please don't
I thought it was make our process actually funny.
Really? Wait, I'm
I
actually.
brought that thing around. Yeah, besides make our.
Okay, that doesn't
No,
work.
it was really good, and like I don't know how much of it is because.
Okay.
we are, but-
You need 5.7 cross.
Only because, well, so like, I do something that like other judges do not do, and I auto reset my scores back to average from direct and cross. So like people, normally what happens in mock trial is you score an 8, then you have an 8 going into cross, and you can go up or down from that. If you get an 8 on direct, then you go back to a 5 on direct, or on
But I
cross.
deserve half of the points, like,
No, you're an average cross.
5.5 is average?
But you're above an
Full
average.
It's above your average.
So you, remember you
I usually go 3 to 9. So like every round I do this week, just pass like
That was a 9.
9, usually 1 9.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of stressful.
I'm pretty low.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You were?
Yep, a little.
Joke's on you, I figured out how to not lock it. I was the one who actually figured out how to lock it.
That was so walking, but he was noticeably louder than me. That was one thing. Nobody was funny, but it had a stop. In every respect. Behind the main cross, around.
Hunter.
What's wrong? You can't watch the track.
This is Alex. This is Hunter's side view.
Hey, Hunter.
You want me to be up here and when do you want me to give you signals?
I think we have, whenever I get to, am I sitting on that one? Whenever I get over. I already,
Right? They say no, great. They say yes. Then you let it drop. I come up.
I was about to say,
And so that's the type of question, like there should be like.
So you know that both of us? You know those well.
I should have a set of questions, and that's just what they. Yeah. You may all be seated, guys. But I think there's like.
Don't walk up when I talk about stuff.
Maybe have that fit into that.
Start here.
Yeah, exactly, it's just a run, that was,
Little fast.
Map shows other places.
shows the VIP room, and then the camera shows the VIP room.
They didn't show the city. I don't think it works for Bangkok.
You know, the thing on, well, yeah. You know, the point, so even in Bangkok, it's.
Yeah, even in Bangkok, so.
I guess probably people are trying to deny that this happened here and all of these loans are perspective. I don't know, just a thought.
No, that's interesting. I'd have to like think about it. I'm sure it's correct. I'm just not good. Oh, and then to avoid this whole, so the issue becomes when Bancroft comes up on the ride taking place in the 16th. This one. I think that you can ask preemptively open-ended questions to every witness prior to that, namely Keenan and Hyde.
Oh,
Were there any other meetings besides the April 13th, April 16th?
They're all gonna-
They're all gonna have to say no. And I think that point is specific. Should give you a little bit more power.
Right, it is
Not
not
just
natural.
yeah, exactly.
It's not going out, yeah, it's not going out.
So, that's another thing. This is good. I feel like I'm, okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Everyone here for the fence?
Yes, Your Honor.
Everyone here for the
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Would someone mind timing me? And just showing me your fingers? Is that? Oh, I can sit here very well, I'll be.
Okay, yeah.
Just bring the chair with you, because there's no other, There you go. What we're talking about, bro. We can change.
I'm sorry?
I just said you can see it in there.
Oh, yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, Mr. Bell, members of the jury. Avery Bancroft was predisposed to pay. Now, we all believe in this idea, the idea of the American dream. It's the hope that if you work hard and you play fair, you can be successful. It's part of what just makes us so great as a nation. But in the sleepy little town of Midlands, there's one casino owner who doesn't believe that idea applies to her, who doesn't believe that she has to play by the rules. And she's admitting that to you today here in court. You see, by presenting a defense of entrapment, she is admitting that she broke the law. Now she wants to distract you from that. She wants you to blame someone else for her actions. She wants you to believe that she was entrapped. That's just something they can come up here and tell you, members of the jury, something they have to prove to you here today in court. It was the defense's job to show you that the only reason the defendant committed this crime is because of the influence of Officer Keenan. And we as a prosecution, we're saying just the opposite. We're saying that the defendant was predisposed to pay. That she was such a person and of such a mindset that she would have committed this crime even without Officer Keenan. Now, as the judge will instruct you later on today, one of the ways we can go about showing you that the defendant was predisposed was by showing you the way she participated in the crime. And that's just what we did. We called 3 witnesses here today, all who took the stand, all whom either saw or heard the defendant participating in this crime. Let's take a look back at what we learned. Our story starts here. October 1st, 2014. This is an exciting day in Midlands. The Gambling Commission has just announced that they'll be handing out a license. And this is a rare event, so people are thrilled. But none more so than the defendant. You see, barely a month goes by before the defendant is at Mr. Covington's, the commissioner's door, knocking. She's looking for drinks. She's looking for discussion. Tracy Menezes took the stand and told you as much today. Now, let's stop and think about what the defense would have you believe. They're trying to tell you that the defendant was entrapped. But if that's true, if that really is the case, then what was she doing at the commissioner's house in the middle of the night, months before she ever even came into contact with Mickey Keenan? Months before Corey Hyde was ever acting as an informant. That just doesn't make sense. Unless she was never predisposed. Unless she was never induced. Unless this defendant was always predisposed to pay. Let's fast forward a few months. Undercover officer by the name of Mickey Keenan has gotten wind of what the defendant's up to. He decides to set up an undercover sting operation to catch the defendant in the act. And he enlists the help of her assistant Corey Hyde to do so. Ms. Hyde told you as much on the stand. She told you how she set up this meeting here on March 31st, 2015. Then Dr. Warren picked up the story. He told you how he analyzed each and every word of that conversation. And at no point did the defendant employ diversionary language. What does that mean? That means that when the bribe was mentioned, the defendant didn't say what nice weather we're having. She didn't bring up the Mets. She didn't even get up and say, no, you know what you're saying is making me uncomfortable. Either stop now or I have to leave. She didn't do any of that. Instead, she asked not once, but twice when she could meet with the commissioner, a man she would later go on to bribe. Well, let's stop and think again. The defense wants you to believe that Ms. Bancroft was entrapped. But Ms. Hyde told you that this meeting was no more than 20 minutes long. The defense would have you believe that Avery Bancroft went from being a good businesswoman to someone who would say thank you for greasing the wheels. In 20 minutes? In less time than it took you or I to get ready for work this morning? That just doesn't make sense. Unless this defendant wasn't induced, unless she was never entrapped, unless Avery Bancroft was always predisposed to pay. Now, the defendant, she did eventually get her wish. She got to meet with Mr. Covington here, April 13th, 2015. It was at this meeting, it was at this time the defendant agreed to the bribe. That she agreed to pay Chase Covington $250,000 for his vote. And at that meeting, with that agreement, this defendant, she broke the American dream. Because you see, it wasn't about hard work or fair play or who had the best ideas. It was about who could lie and buy and cheat their way to success. And that's just not what we believe in this country. The defense wants you to forget about that. Wants you to ignore that. And it's trying to distract you by saying it's some sort of conspiracy against Ms. Bancroft. A conspiracy members of the jury, they called 3 witnesses to the stand today. 3. All of whom are either employed by the defendant or the defendant herself. Even after all of this, even after all she has been through, Ms. Bancroft is still trying to buy her way out of trouble. We, at the prosecution, we've done just the opposite. We've called 3 witnesses to the stand who have no stake in this case. 3 unbiased witnesses who both saw and heard the defendant participating in this crime. That was our job. It was our duty to show you beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant was predisposed to pay. Now, that was a high burden. It was one that we readily accepted, and one that we've surpassed in today's trial. And we ask that when you go back to that jury deliberation room, you find the only verdict that makes sense. The only verdict that rebuilds our American dream. Verdict that holds Ms. Bancroft responsible for being predisposed to pay. Verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Mr. Bell, do you have a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor, but before I begin, can I move the easel to have more use of the well during my closing
Of
argument?
course.
And I will be easel.
You are a woman. He is a man.
I am.
That
That is easy.
That isn't easy. It's true. Thank you. You may proceed.
May it please the court, Delwa, members of the jury. Miss Bancroft was the police's puppet. We all know what a puppet is. We've seen one. We might have even played with one. We all know that a puppet doesn't move on its own. Someone else has to pull the strings. I would like to make it clear, we are not contending the fact that Ms. Bancroft gave Chase Covington a bribe. We are, however, showing that as a puppet, Ms. Bancroft was pulled in different directions by an unseen source, by someone behind the scenes, by a puppeteer. Ms. Bancroft wasn't guided into giving a bribe. She wasn't nudged. She wasn't even pushed. Miss Bancroft was yanked by her strings into giving a bribe to Chase Covington. The puppeteer who orchestrated this entire case is Detective Mickey Keenan. As the puppeteer, Detective Keenan made sure to drape Miss Bancroft in the strings of entrapment. The prosecution has tried to make entrapment seem like this big, complicated legal term, but it's actually quite simple. Imagine Miss Bancroft being led into her office by Corey Hyde. Miss Hyde begins placing string after string after string until Miss Bancroft's entire body is covered. You can look from the strings and see how they lead from Miss Bancroft's body to the hands of none other than Detective Mickey Keenan. Detective Keenan begins pulling on these strings, forcing Miss Bancroft to move. This represents inducement. Shows without Detective Keenan, Miss Bancroft would have never bribed Chase Covington because she had no predisposition. She was repeatedly influenced on multiple occasions by Detective Keenan and Corey Hyde. The question is now, where does Corey Hyde fit into the picture? You heard from Miss Hyde herself that she was acting as an informant to Detective Keenan, but she was an informant to a government agent. During her time as an informant, you heard from Miss Hyde herself today that she felt like she was setting her boss up. At this point, Corey Hyde began entrapping Miss Bancroft. As an informant for a government agent, Corey Hyde's actions can reflect, as an extension of Detective Keenan, the government itself. Miss Bancroft was entrapped by a government agent. She was entrapped by Detective Keenan. She was entrapped by Corey Hyde. She is the police's puppet. On their March 31st, 2015 meeting, Corey Hyde and Detective Keenan relentlessly questioned Miss Bancroft about what she would do to make sure she got her second casino license. Corey Hyde asked what she would be willing to do to sweeten the pot, while Detective Keenan made sure to emphasize that Miss Bancroft needed to make Mr. Covington happy and pitch more than just ideas. At this point, Detective Keenan and Corey Hyde began laying the strings. You heard from Miss Bancroft herself that the thought of bribing Chase Covington would have never entered her mind had it not been for Detective Keenan. You heard from Miss Bancroft herself today. She came up and testified on the stand. You heard the words come out of her mouth that whenever she showed up to Chase Covington's home in early October, she had no plans to bribe him. Mickey Keenan wasn't at this meeting. There was also no predisposition at this meeting. You heard from J.D. Lorian, an expert in her field, that the puppeteer in this case, the lead investigator, Detective Keenan, that he failed to follow proper protocol through this entire investigation. You heard today that Detective Keenan did not even receive warrants from the District Attorney's Office until April of 2015. Members of the jury, this is 2 years after the investigation had already started. This is a direct violation of the Attorney General's guidelines for undercover operations. Besides having a blatant disregard for guidelines set by the government, Detective Keenan was also never trained in how to run an undercover operation. Mickey Keenan was just a regular police officer trying to make it into the big leagues, trying to catch his big fish. Even if it meant forcing Miss Bancroft to do something she would have never done. Detective Keenan made Miss Bancroft pay the price. The prosecution has tried to sit here and tell you today that Miss Bancroft was predisposed to pay. There was no predisposition in today's case, but Miss Bancroft still had a price to pay. $250,000. $200,000 to Chase Covington, and $50,000 split between Corey Hyde and Mickey Keenan. The defense did not have to present a case today. We did not have to produce our own witnesses. We didn't have to bring in our own evidence. But we did, because we knew that our client was entrapped. We took on something called an affirmative defense today to show that Miss Bancroft was not predisposed to bribe Chase Covington, but that Detective Keenan influenced her into committing bribery. Members of the jury, the prosecution today had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Bancroft was predisposed. This is the highest burden in our legal system. On the other hand, the defense, we had to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that more likely than not, Miss Bancroft was influenced into giving a bribe to Chase Covington. The prosecution failed to meet their burden in today's case. The defense, we met ours. I am confident that whenever you return to the deliberation room and you remember the testimony you heard today from every single witness that proves that no predisposition is apparent in this case, whenever you think of the evidence that was entered today, none of it proved that Miss Bancroft was predisposed. Miss Bancroft was not predisposed, but she still had a price to pay. The prosecution wants to talk about upholding the American dream, but why do that when Detective Keenan can't even uphold the law? Miss Bancroft is the police's puppet. Find her not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Who was pulling her strings when she stuffed $250,000 into a briefcase? Not Mickey Keenan. He certainly wasn't there. Well, who was making her dance when she went to her head of security and told her not to fix the blind spots in the VIP room? Wasn't Corey Hyde. Who was in control of the defendant when she walked into that VIP room and gave a politician $250,000 for his vote? Sometimes people have to be responsible for their actions. Miss Bancroft was always in control. She was willing to do whatever it took. She was predisposed to pay. Find her guilty.
Thank you, everyone.